Welcome back. In the last video, I showed you how to design drum and bass or modern drum and bass kick drums from scratch using Serum. Today, I'm going to do the same thing, but we're going to do this for snare drums. So let's create ourselves a MIDI track and let's go and create ourselves a group for the snare. Let's just take this saturator here and I'm going to copy this and paste it on the snare group because we probably want to use that as well. Let's bring the drive all the way down. Let's call this one fundamental. And then let's make ourselves another MIDI track. And this one is going to be called noise. And we're going to make ourselves a snare drum using 2 layers. So let's get started. We're going to copy that MIDI clip that we had. And we're going to put that right here. And first we want to find the right pitch. So let's open up a Serum on this track and let's see what pitch snare we're gonna do. So let's load up a sine wave. So again, I'm gonna go into edit right here, just like in the last video, go to the formula presets and click sine, and I'm gonna go and take this down so that we get a perfect sine wave like that. Now sine waves are great for kick drums and also for snare drums, but when you're making snare drums, or when I analyzed snare drums, what I see is that a lot of times the fundamental tone is not a pure sine wave. It's instead sort of like a soft square kind of shape, which you kind of get when you clip a sine wave. So if we would push this sine wave through some distortion, it would start to get rounded off a little bit, and that would be a rounded square wave type of shape. And I mean, if you distort a sine wave hard enough, it will eventually become a square wave. So we want to create that rounded square kind of shape so that we don't have to distort it to get that sound. Right here we've got bin 1, that is this oscillation that we're seeing right here. That's our root oscillation or fundamental. And we want to add some harmonics to it. So I'm going to go to bin number 3 and I'm going to add bin number 3. So if you know, a square wave is built out of nothing but odd harmonics. So that is the fundamental tone at 1 and then 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 and so forth. If you want to make a sol wave, you're going to have every harmonic in it. So you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and so forth. But square waves have only the odd harmonics. So if we increase bin number 3 right here to about maybe 35%, see what that does. We get this kind of a shape. So already we can see it starts looking a little bit like a rounded square, but there's this little dip right here in the middle. We can take that dip out of there again by increasing bin number 5 ever so slightly. And you can see, while I do that, that dip is disappearing. So we want to move this to somewhere around there, and now we want to play around with these to get it as close to a rounded square wave kind of shape as we can. Like, I don't want to see too many bumps in here. This looks pretty good. And let's go and click here on process. And I'm going to click normalize each, and that makes sure that it's at its loudest possible level. That looks pretty good. There's a little bit of a wobbly thing in the top, but it's so subtle, it's not really going to be important. So this is a rounded square wave shape. That's too low pitched for a snare. Let's go in here and let's change this note. So we're going to need something higher pitched. Still not high enough. Getting a little bit more into the pitch of a snare drum. So if we copy this over, we can hear what we get. We could do E, but I think B might be better. So B is the perfect 5th above E. So if you have an E minor chord, E minor, you get E, G, B. Right? So B is that top note of an E minor chord or an E major chord. So that's why it will work. B3. See, it's all about what pitch do you want. B2 would be a little bit more of a lower snare. B3, we're going to get a lot higher pitched. So you can look at the frequency as well. Take an EQ. And just put an EQ8 on here, open it up. You can see where that frequency is. So B2 would give us a 250 hertz snare, which is pretty standard for drum and bass. I would say not necessarily for the more modern drum and bass. The more modern drum and bass, the snares tend to be a bit higher pitched. But if you're looking at the more, you know, let's say drum and bass from a couple of years ago, 250 hertz was used all over the place. So this is definitely a pitch that we could do. I'm gonna try E3. That would give us 330 hertz. Let's try that for now. We can always change it up afterwards, but for now, let's try this. And we need to give this a little bit of a volume shape. So I'm bringing the volume all the way down. And let's go and do envelope mode on the snare drum on LFO1 here. And then assign that to the volume. And we need to create a little shape. So I like my snare drums to have a little bit of a hold stage right here, so it stays at the maximum volume for the duration of the transient, and then it starts dropping down in level. Now, snare drums, again in drum and bass, are pretty short. When you have a really quick tempo and your drums are quite long, the longer those drums are, the less space you have in between each of those drum sounds to put other sounds. So because drum and bass drums are very punchy, very big, they're almost full spectrum sounds most of the time, and they're going to be very loud. If they're too long, you're going to eat away precious space where you can put like percussion or bass or other kinds of sounds that you want to have in your track. So by having the drum sounds tighter, so shorter, you will basically give yourself a little bit more space in between each drum hit to put other sounds, and that is why these sounds are so short. So drum and bass snares are not really that much different in terms of the length from, let's say, a kick drum. So I'm going to set this to an 8 note, and we're going to create a shape that ends roughly halfway, something like that maybe, and maybe curve that down a bit so that we get a bit of a pluckier shape. And what do we get? Okay, it's a little bit long for the fundamental. Let's actually let's make it a lot quicker, because it's the fundamental part that we're making, so this should be quicker. The total length of the snare should be about a 16th note, but the fundamental needs to be quite quick. So that's more like it. That seems more like it. So now we need some noise. Let's go and grab ourselves some noise. Now again, you can use the Serum noises, but remember these are mono. I said this in the last video as well. If you want to get stereo noises, just take one of these mono noises and put some chorus on it. Take one of these noises and maybe just bounce it to audio, pan it all the way to the left, duplicate that channel, pan that one all the way to the right, and then offset the two samples from each other so that they're not exactly the same noise in the left and right channel. That way you get stereo noise as well. Or just go to my Patreon, patreon.com/ARTFX, and download these stereo noises.
Seriously, like what you're waiting for, there's like 2 GB of samples, presets, racks, and a whole bunch of more stuff on there right now, so, yeah, please help.
So I'm gonna pick stereo noise 1, and I'm just gonna increase the phase a little so that we get a nice stereo sound right at the bat, and I'm gonna increase this level, and now we get this. Okay, let's also bring the level all the way down here now, and let's assign LFO2 to the level. Set it to envelope mode, and we're going to make this one an 8 note long. And then we're going to basically create our volume shape for the noise. So remember, we have this one right here, and then we have the noise. We want the noise to come in when the fundamental of the snare drum ends. So we don't want the noise to be present in the first part of the snare. At least I don't think that sounds nice. So we want to get a shape that is sort of like something like this, but then we want to have a little bit of a gap here at the start. So I'm going to do something like this, something like that. And I'm going to maybe unsync this. Let's curve this one down a bit. We can pitch this one up a little maybe. Pitch it down. Let's try just pitching it up ever so slightly. So that's our start, basically. Oh, we also need to bring the random phase down on the oscillator, otherwise it's gonna be slightly different every time it triggers. We don't want that. Now, this might still sound very basic to you, and that is because it also is. Now, I think the pitch might be a little bit too low, but we're just gonna work with it for now. We can change the pitch later. The snare drum needs some punch. Right now, it doesn't sound like a good snare. It doesn't have the punch it needs. So how can we give this the punch that we need to give it? I would use another LFO, set this to envelope mode, and we're gonna create a shape sort of like something like this. Turn off BPM sync, and let's make this one fast as hell. And we're gonna assign this to the pitch. So matrix LFO 3 to the oscillator A coarse pitch. Make sure it's unipolar. So click this, make sure it's unipolar, and it's only pointing in one direction. And now we want to increase the range of this. And you can hear what that is doing. Let's increase that rate. We're going to go all the way up to 100 Hertz. And then we're going to tighten this up. So this with, and then this is without. Do you hear the difference? It's huge. Like, just that very short pitch envelope at the start of a snare will give it, you know, the pitch that it needs, basically. Next up, I think we can maybe do this a little bit more, a little bit bigger, actually. Let's do a little bit of a hold stage at the start of the snare. And then we're going to drop down. And let's also have a little look at how this snare drum looks right now. So let's record this on this audio track right here at the top that I have, just to see what we get. So that's what we have now. Okay. The part right here, where we have the click, is a little bit too high-pitched. It's very high-pitched compared to the rest of the fundamental. The fundamental is a little bit too short, and the noise comes in too quick. So the snare should be a little bit of, should be about this length, so it's a bit too short. We need to increase the length, and we need to make the noise come in a little bit later, somewhere around here maybe. And the fundamental can also end somewhere around there. And this one needs to be a little bit less high-pitched. So I'm going to go and decrease this coarse pitch right here. Decrease that a bit. That's a lot better. See, so it's not as high-pitched now. It's a nice subtle extra pitch movement. We can maybe increase a little bit. Yeah, that seems nice. Then we want to increase the length of the fundamental part. So we have this set to a synced value. We can actually go and unsync it and then just play around with it. So there we go. Now we get a bit of that woody tone that you would hear in the start of a snare drum. We can now also see that it's a little bit longer. You can see that oscillation continuing up until about right here. Yeah, that seems a little bit better. And now the noise needs to come in later. So let's go in here and let's take the noise and let's just go in here and let's just increase that a little bit. So now it comes in a little bit later. It's still a little bit too early for my taste, so let's go and back this down even more. A bit better. What could be good to do is maybe slowing this one down a bit. Okay, now we can hear the snare drum is getting longer as well, which is exactly what we needed. But now this is coming a little bit too late. See, it's already going down on the fundamental. We want this to come in a little bit earlier now. So let's move this one back a little again. This is a little bit finicky, you know. This is something you can play around with for a while, but this will really help to make the drum feel good. So we're just going to shorten it up ever so slightly there. That's starting to be a little bit more like it. Can back this down a bit more. Yeah, that's starting to be more like it. So nice clean part here, and then the noise comes in. Yeah, I like that. Okay, let's boost the level a little bit. Now, right now, I have this all done inside of one instance of Serum. I would actually do this into two different ones, so I can process the noise different from the fundamental. Let's copy this one, and I'm gonna paste it right on here on the noise. So now we have two of the same patch. I'm gonna go into the fundamental one, I'm gonna turn the noise off, and I'm gonna go into the noise layer here, and I'm going to turn off the fundamental. This way now we have the same thing, but it's basically just done on two tracks. And now we can process the two different from each other. So why do I do this? Well, I want to add resonance to the tail of the snare drum. There's various ways of how you can do this. You can add resonance in plenty of ways. You can use synthesis, you can do ring modulation with some weird pitch values to create interesting resonances, metallic sounds. That's a way to do it, but we don't necessarily have to. We already have everything we need right now to create any type of resonance in this snare drum that we need. So, what do I mean with that? How do you create a resonance? A resonance is basically a very loud frequency that is resonating on just that particular frequency, right? That's a resonance. So we can create that already out of noise. Since we already have noise, we can make our resonances now. So let's see. We've got the fundamental and the noise, and let's put an EQ on the noise, and let's first see what the noise looks like. So we got a lot of low end in the noise, which we don't need first of all. So let's go into Serum. And let's turn the filter on, select a high pass 18, bring the resonance all the way down, make the noise run through this, and right off the bat, we can see that it has taken off all the low end, which is exactly what we need. We don't need any of that low end. So now, if we bring the fundamental in as well, we can see the fundamental is hitting on the frequency about 322 Hertz. So let's go into the noise layer here, and let me make sure that this one is set to 322. Okay, that's close enough. So that is sort of like the frequency at which the fundamental of the snare drum is hitting at. We want to create resonances above this frequency. So let's add our first shape right here, and let's bring the Q all the way up on a bell curve, and I'm gonna move this somewhere over here and increase the gain, and listen to what happens when I move this around. So I'm gonna look for a note that I like the sound of with that E3. So maybe an A3. And we are going to make sure this is on the noise. It is. Oh. Not really hearing a lot of this one though. Okay, let's move up. Okay, there we go. That one could work. Let's add another one. Let's do another one here. Bring it all the way up. Quite like that one. Let's do another one. Q all the way up. Raise the gain. That one is quite nice. Let's do another one. You can see I'm just boosting frequencies at the moment. And when you hold shift, by the way, and then move the frequency around, you get more fine control. Kind of like that one. Increase this again. Gain all the way up. That one kind of works. It's quite resonant already, so it might work to add that one a little bit. We can do one more. Okay. That's the starting point. So I've basically just boosted these resonances, and by doing that, let's just do one final more here. It's the frequency we were hitting at. Okay, so now we can also play around with the amounts of each individual band, so... Okay, that sounds pretty good. You might think this is a lot of work for a snare, and it is, but it will give you full control over what the snare drum actually does in terms of the resonance. So if we now go back here, so let's move this, close that down. So I want to automate the scale here. So if we take that scale, bring it down to 0, we just get that, right? So I can automate this and affect how much resonance I'm getting over time. So if I boost this, we get more. If I decrease it, we get less. See? So what we can do is we can do something like this maybe, where it goes up, and then it goes back down. Set this to 0. Sounds pretty good. And what I can show you as well now, if you go and open this up and click and drag across all of these, you can now move them all at once. So if we play it now and move these, you can really quickly make snare drums with different resonances out of the same patch and just find a good section. I quite like that one. So now we basically have that with the noise or with the fundamental part right there. And we have this one here. So let's take the saturator. Let's increase the saturation. Let's do 2. Seems about right, maybe 4. Still sounds pretty good. Let's try 6. Maybe a little bit much. Let's do 4 again. And now let's bring the kick drum back as well. And I'm going to copy this one over. So with the automation, so it's just going to have the automation on the entire thing. Loop this, and now with the kick drum, we now get this. So again, to show you, without this, that's what you get. And then with, it almost sounds like there's an acoustic layer in there, but there is none. There is no acoustic layer whatsoever. It's literally just coming from this. And you can play around with this, of course, to change how it sounds. Like if you want the transient to be clean, just make sure that it stays on 0 for a little bit, and then it comes up in the tail. And now the transient is clean, but the tail has resonance. See? I'm just looking at this recording right here. See where the fundamental ends, roughly speaking? That's also where that one comes up. So you can hear that in this area where the noise is at its loudest, the resonance is also getting at its loudest. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. So it's all about just finding whatever works for this particular snare and changing these values, or changing the position of these resonances. Even changing one of them will hugely affect the sound of the snare. And you can, as soon as you've made one of these, you can make endless different variations on it. And that's why this method is so good. So one more thing, what could we add here? I think one other layer to add to the snare that would be good could maybe be some kind of a clap layer. We can do a clap sample, or we can just do another serum. I'm just going to try another serum and just try maybe add a little bit of a noise splash to the snare drum. So let's just do some noise. Let's use some stereo noise. Let's do a different one so that we don't get any phasing. And let's do envelope or LFO1 to the volume here. And we're going to create ourselves a shape, about an 8-note long maybe. And we just want to have a little bit of a splash of noise coming up here. And let's make sure that we have MIDI clip there. pitch this up a little. And let's do our high pass on the noise. And I'm going to use another envelope and trying to emulate a little bit of the sound of what happens when you have noise of a snare. So noise of a snare usually starts brighter and gets darker towards the end of the tail. So by applying a little bit of an envelope shape like this on the pitch, we can sort of like emulate that. And the pitch is sort of like dropping down a little bit of the noise. Also, let's bring up the phase here. And we can do the same thing with the frequency here as well. So maybe back this up a little. And let's do a little bit of more on this. I'm gonna take a low pass filter. And I want to automate this one down a bit over time so that it just gets a little darker at the end of that noise. So that's what we have now. And we can... yeah, we could do a little bit of a clap kind of thing. But honestly, I don't think it's needed. I was talking about like a clap kind of volume shape, but I don't think we need that. So let's just boost the high end here. And let's decrease some of the mid-range in that noise. Now, do you hear how it sounds very bright here? And if we move this frequency down, we get more of that darker tone in it. I'm going to take this LFO here, and let's modulate this down. See how it's changing the tone of that noise over time? That will help in the final sound of the snare. So that's what we have now. Let's listen to what that noise actually adds. That's without. And that's with. So you get a little bit of a splash of noise on top, which really helps. So this is going to be our resonance. And this will be our noise splash. And let's take our friend, the Transient Master by Native Instruments, and put it in front of the saturator on the snare group. And let's just see what happens if we take the sustain down quite a bit. Maybe a bit much. It's very subtle. It's not really needed that much on this one. These are already pretty tight anyway, so... but that's our snare drum now. And I think that leads us to the end of this video. So, I'll record this right now, and I think this is pretty good already. Okay, let's have a little look at these. Let's analyze and see how these look. Kick drum looks pretty damn good. I like that little burst of noise coming in there. That really adds something to that kick. Snare drum looks really good, actually. Really good fundamental. Maybe a little bit long on that transient, but it's good. It gives it a bit of punch in the mix, which should be fine. I wished we would have a little bit more oscillations of the fundamental in here, which would mean the fundamental needs to be higher pitch. We can quickly try that out. If we change this E note to a B note, we don't have to affect the other ones because they're noise. They're not pitched. They're not tonal sounds. So we only have to change the fundamental. And right off the bat, we got a different snare. Now we have a snare drum hitting in the key of B. So it's which one you prefer. That one or that one. I actually think I like the second one. Which means, let's adjust this one a little bit. So, this one, and then we have this one. This is the pitch envelope. Let's make this one a little bit shorter. Back that down a bit. It's nice. And then we have this one. Okay, so how long is this? That's pretty good. So you can see how making drums is a very time-consuming process, but it's quite fun to do, actually. If you know how to do this, it's actually quite fun to spend time making drum sounds and just seeing what it does, like what happens to the individual parts of the drum sound when you're working with it. It's very interesting. Okay, I think that should be good enough for now. Let's copy over the new fundamental. So we're now having a snare drum in the key of B, which is quite a good pitch actually, for the key of E. Okay, one final thing that I think we should do at this moment is add some very subtle reverb, because the snare drum in particular, it needs a bit of reverb to sound better. So I'm gonna go and open up Valhalla Room. I'm gonna just put this on the entire drums group, so it's also gonna be applying a little bit of the same reverb to the kick drum as well. It will basically do it to everything in this entire drum group. So let's listen to this with just the reverb first, because that's what we need. Actually, we need to take off this here, group these two in a group called drums, and let's put this on that group. So no pre-delay, we don't need that. I'm gonna bring the time down a lot so that we get more something like that. We just want it to be very short, and then we can play around with the modes here. I like the dance room. Dance room is quite nice. The LV one is also pretty cool. This one has a little bit of a fluttery kind of tone in it, which can be nice. I like that one though. And then let's group this create a dry chain. So this is going to be our dry chain. This is our wet chain. And all we want to do is just bring this in so that we hear it ever so slightly. I'm also going to high pass that reverb layer. So just turn this into a high pass, because we really only want the high end of the kick and maybe the snare drum to catch this reverb. We don't want the low end of the kick to be in the reverb. So now, if we just hear the reverb, see, there's not really much low end in that. And I'm just gonna go and now introduce this one while it's playing and see when I like it. So let's take another one. Make sure we cut off all that low end. Now this is very subtle, and you might think, I don't really hear change. It's so short. But listen, this is width. And you don't really hear reverb. It doesn't sound like there's a lot of reverb on this. But when you take it out now, that's when you notice the difference. So this is with the reverb, and then I'll turn it off after a couple of beats. Do you hear how that reverb just ever so slightly introduces a bit of extra room, especially on the snare? And just without it, it just sounds weak. It just suddenly sounds a lot worse without it. So that's basically it for now, I think. Let's move this to... yeah, no, we're gonna leave that on here. We can maybe do another saturator on the entire group, just to kind of squeeze everything together and make sure that that reverb is kind of gelling with the drums. Let's do +2 decibels maybe. It's a little bit much, so let's back these one down a bit. So 2 on this one, and let's do also 2 on that one, so that we now get 2 stages of saturation. We have one stage where the layers of each sound are saturated together, ever so slightly to gel them together. And then we have another one on the entire group, which helps to gel the reverb with the drum sounds together. And then afterwards, when we start adding hats in the next video, we will also make sure that we get that gelling together on the group bus. So that's basically it. So now that was a long video. That was almost an hour. That's 50 minutes, close to 50 minutes. But I think this is needed. We need to do a video about this, and I get so many questions about how to make drum sounds for drum and bass, how to make them from scratch. So yeah, I wanted to do this video. That's gonna be it for this one. The next one is going to be about hi-hats and groove and adding percussion and getting the drums to sound good, because right now all we have is a kick and snare. If you want to see that video earlier than everybody else, you can support me on Patreon. Patreon.com/ARTFX, link is in the description below this video. I post monthly sample packs on my Patreon for you to download, and you get access to my videos, and you basically help support me in what I do and help me to make more content for you guys. So that's gonna be it for this one, and I hope to see you guys again in the next video. Peace.